We're creatures of habit. We're going to learn.
It has features that are vaguely like a virus.
We may have won a few battles, but we have not won the war.
Hey guys, it's May 15th, 2020.
And this is Quick Takes wrap of the pandemic this week.
I'm Jennifer in New York, where some grocery stores and restaurants are actually warning about meat shortages. That's because in America, the coronavirus threatens a meat industry that many say is too concentrated. Although thousands of meat processing workers have contracted COVID-19 and several have died, President Trump ordered the plants to remain open. We visited a farm in Arkansas to see how their business is being affected.
What I want to tell people in this country is there's no meat shortage. There is a disruption in the supply chain. I am the farm manager here at the Flying Sea Ranch in Conway, Arkansas. There's about 600 or 700 acres here in Faulkner County. We have about 300 head of cattle, about 160 mama cows that produce calves each year. The baby calf's name is Corona because he was born right in the middle of the pandemic and we couldn't think of anything else to name him. Everybody from live cattle market to retail side are hurting, everybody, especially the live cattle people because there's such a disconnect between that market and the retail side of the boxed beef. With any protein, chicken, pork, beef, it has to be a USDA processed plant. This cannot be a custom plant. So you close down this pork plant or the chicken plant or the beef plant, there's nowhere for those animals to go to get processed for the consumers. So there's nothing for the truckers to take to the grocery stores.
So you have the farmer that's raising the product and then you have the demand at the consumer level. The link in the middle is the processor that has to take that live animal and turn it into a retail ready cut to be able to go to that consumer. Farms like Flying Sea Ranch, what we're doing is we're receiving in the farmer or the producer's livestock. We're taking that product and we're harvesting it, fabricating it, putting it into retail packaging and boxing it. I think meat processing has become a hot topic because we've seen what happens when a centralized food system where we have 4 processors in the United States is producing 85% of the meat that goes into market. And when we see that get disrupted, what happens to the supply chain?
I do not have any reservations as far as reopening plants. I think if they put the health of the employee first at the forefront, they'll succeed. Now, it might be different. There might be a new norm. We're creatures of habit. We're going to learn. We're going to adapt. American farmers, they are the toughest. They're resilient. When they're hit with something like this, they get going. They produce more. They produce faster. I am very optimistic for the future of agriculture. A positive note that could come out of this pandemic is people know where their food comes from. They're more in tune with American agriculture. Once that hits and clicks, boy, it's going to be beautiful. And we're going to have that connection with the consumer probably more so than ever before. That's what it's about. That's what this country's about. So just everybody hang in there, don't panic, be positive. That's all we can do.
There's an enormous amount of unidentified microorganisms living within animals, plants, and even our own bodies.
I would go so far as to say a substantial fraction of that is what we would call viral dark matter. Hundreds of thousands of unknown viruses probably are covering our bodies, in our intestine, on our skin, in our mouth, and everywhere else.
Hi everyone, I'm Kurumi Mori in Tokyo. We've been hearing a lot recently about a new normal post-COVID-19 and how the world may change after a pandemic. But what will that really look like? So to answer that and more is Dr. Stefan Hajkovic from CSIRO in Australia. So Stefan, can you first give us a general overview of what the new normal would look like?
Yeah, we certainly are into a new normal. This represents a massive and unprecedented shock to the world economy and to humanity in terms of the health risks, how we're living, our jobs. It's all happening across the globe at the same time.
Give me 2 or 3 main things that we can expect to see that's different.
Yeah. So digital technology is playing a critical role in helping people survive this crisis and rebuild afterwards. 1.5 billion students across the globe, including my children outside, are studying online because their schools are closed, universities are closed. So there's a massive change in how we're educating. There's a lot of entrepreneurs at home with time on their hands now testing new digital models. Telework as well. The bulk of the Australian workforce, like me, is working from home. Will we go back into the offices? Me and a lot of my colleagues have realised we've got an extra 2 hours a day because we're no longer commuting to the city centre and back, which represents a huge step up in efficiency. Plus, we're forming new networks. I'm here at my desktop talking to somebody from Japan, which is wonderful. And that's new, right? That is not a normal workday. And I think a lot more of this is actually happening. The networks are actually going across borders because working with you is no different to working with a colleague who might be only a couple of streets away. So teleworking is likely to take hold and change the way our cities work. We're seeing in the real estate markets in Australia early signs of regional Australia and coastal destinations near beaches and the sea change, tree change phenomenon we talk about. We're seeing prices go up in those places because it's quite possible teleworking has gone mainstream and people are able to live where they want, not where they have to live for work. So that's quite interesting. Then there's telehealth. The way you go to a doctor isn't going to be the same again. Telehealth actually represents an opportunity to massively decrease healthcare costs.
Overall, are you optimistic? You told me before that you get to spend a couple extra hours at home with your kids now that you work from home.
Overall, all my work in Foresight, I've been working in this field for the last 10 years, tend to be rational to have an optimistic view of the future. Overall, the data we look at and the way things change, you're being strictly rational if you bet on a better future, not a worse one. For the vast majority of human beings in the vast parts of the world, things are getting better when we look at the data. And I think there is a way through to the other side of this. The crucial bit is learning, embracing science and technology in our personal lives and skills, but also at national level is really critical, and taking advantage of it to find our way to the other side. So those countries that have used science and technology to look at responses to COVID-19 have done a hell of a lot better than those that haven't.
Here we go. I can have my espresso.
Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte has reopened some manufacturing activities.
There actually aren't that many people today. We were told that they only allow up to 20% of capacity for the park.
I think people can trust that we have a president who wants to reopen and reopen safely. These are data-driven guidelines to reopening. The president has those in place, so there's no reason to be concerned.
많은 전문가들이 예상하는 2차 대유행에도 대비해야 하는 상황입니다.
Desde este mismo lunes, algo más de la mitad de la población española podrán, entre otras cuestiones, celebrar reuniones sociales privadas de hasta 10 personas, ir a comercios, a terrazas, a lugares de culto. Pero me gustaría volver a recordarlo, a subrayarlo. El virus no ha desaparecido, sigue ahí.
In 10 days' time, we will have reopened most businesses in New Zealand. But we all know there is more to do. We may have won a few battles, but we have not won the war.
So today, May 15th, is the official unpause date for New York State. But here in New York City, where I live, there's still very few signs of that. That's because Governor Cuomo broke up the state into 10 regions, and laid out a set of criteria that each region must meet before reopening. Right now, only a few upstate regions actually meet those requirements. That means places like drive-in theaters and outdoor activities can resume. And though we have made some progress here in New York City, we're still not yet at the point where we can reopen. That's why many major retailers like Sephora you see here are still closed. And the places that are open are adhering to very strict measures. Also, the NYPD is out patrolling streets and parks, making sure people stick to social distancing. The good news, though, there is some sign that life is returning here. Many small businesses across the city have started to reopen. Of course, it's not business as usual, but at least it's a step in a direction.
We have to find a way to protect our customer and to protect us. I feel the situation will be very difficult now, maybe still next month, but if this is the only way I can have income, then I still need to try to do it.
Great.
Today we wanted to talk to you about COVID-19 and young people, specifically kids. First, I wanted to play some sound from Dr. Fauci this week during his testimony.
That we don't know everything about this virus, and we really better be very careful, particularly when it comes to children.
At this point, Drew, what do we know about COVID-19 and kids?
As long as this has gone on, we've assumed from the beginning that children are at relatively low risk, and that does still appear to be the case. The risk remains hugely in people who are older, who have pre-existing health conditions. There are a number of things out there that I think are worrisome in some of these cases that have emerged. Children still do appear to be lower down on the risk spectrum for this.
Would you be able to tell us a little bit about what are some of the symptoms in children? What's it looking like for them?
They do appear to have far less severe illness than we've seen in a lot of adults. There have been very, very few deaths among children. We have heard of things that have become concerning in a small number of patients, like this Kawasaki syndrome, which is an inflammatory and feverish condition. That still remains a very, very rare complication, but we still don't know exactly why or how it's happening.
So Drew, why is it that this virus is behaving differently in kids than it is in adults?
One of the things that it's important to remember is not just that it's behaving differently in kids from adults, it's behaving differently in every adult patient as well. Disease is really complex. Our bodies are really complex. We really see a huge variety of responses to an illness. Some people seem to get this disease and be largely asymptomatic. Other people appear to get it and have quite a severe reaction. I think that's one of the things we're still trying to understand.
Do you think it is reason for concern, though, for parents?
I'm a parent. I have a 2-year-old at home, and every time I hear my daughter get sick outside of this, I'm worrying, is she okay? It's something that as a parent, you obviously have immense concern and care for your children. I think one of the things that parents can take away from this is that the risks are relatively low here. At some point or another, people want schools to reopen, summer camps to reopen. Being able to give people a reasonable estimate of risk and understanding of this disease is going to be crucial for both getting schools back open, which is also going to allow parents to get back to work. But there are a lot of important business and societal and educational questions that are tied up in understanding this, as well as just the basic healthcare and medical ones.
At the beginning of this pandemic, there were rumors going around about how kids weren't really affected by this virus. Why is it that we're now learning about this more and more?
One of the things that often happens in a new disease like this is that we learn more as we go, and as we see more cases, we see more and more instances of the rarer types of cases. I think some of this is just our evolving understanding of the disease and it being in enough patients for us to see how it acts differently in all sorts of different groups of people that can get it.
everyone, I'm Sarah Ponsek and I am a markets reporter with Bloomberg News. When it comes to the stock market, there is a tale of two stories, a dichotomy between the virus haves and the virus have-nots. Now, the virus haves being those that perform well in the environment that we are dealing with. Everyone having to stay at home, the likes of Amazon, Netflix, also because this is really due to a healthcare epidemic, healthcare companies and biotechnology companies as well. The virus have-nots are those that don't do so well in this type of environment. Your travel companies, say the airlines, for example. And it is this divergence that really does help to explain the gap between the stock market and the economy. It's a very common question. How is it possible that the stock market can be so resilient, some benchmarks like the Nasdaq 100 positive for the year, when we just saw the highest unemployment rate in 9 decades? And it's a great question, but partially it can be explained by looking underneath the market's hood at the haves and the have-nots, because not everything has done so well. We'll start with those that have done well, which you would call the haves. So technology and healthcare, for example, and they just happen to make up a lot of these popular indexes that we follow, like the Nasdaq and the S&P 500. You combine the market cap of the technology and healthcare, for example, on the S&P 500, and it makes up just about 40% of the index. So that's really helped these benchmarks move higher, particularly the Nasdaq 100 and the Nasdaq Composite Index, which turned higher on the year at a point in time. But this does not tell the whole story. Rather, the average stock in the S&P 500 is still down about 20%, or maybe even more. Also, smaller companies, if you look at the Russell 2000 benchmark, this is a benchmark of small companies. Oftentimes they have higher debt levels. They're still very much under a lot of pressure this year as well. And also what's called cyclical companies. These are the areas of the stock market that are very closely intertwined with the economy. So financials, industrials, they're still down 30% this year. So the next time you hear someone say, how is it possible we have this gap between the stock market and the economy? Well, at a high level, that is very much true. You should say, you might want to check the details.
There are a huge number of viruses living inside animals, plants, and even our own bodies, but we only know about some of them. Here's a deeper dive into the mystery behind viral dark matter.
Humans have mapped nearly all of the land on Earth, explored the deepest oceans, stepped foot on the moon, and sent probes to the planets and beyond. But there's a whole world that is left largely unexplored, the microbial world. There's an enormous amount of unidentified microorganisms living within animals, plants, and even our own bodies. Take the human gut, for example. Only about 50% of the microbes are identifiable.
The other 50% don't match to anything that we know about. And I would go so far as to say a substantial fraction of that is what we would call viral dark matter. Viral dark matter is the genetic material from viruses that is so different than the sequences of viruses that we know about that it can't be detected with most conventional methods.
In astronomy, dark matter is attributed to certain gravitational observations in the cosmos, like the formation of galaxies. But so far it can't be detected.
And that's a pretty good analogy for what we're studying here, right? We can't detect it with any of our reference viruses, but we know it exists, we can see it, it has features that are vaguely like a virus.
Under a microscope, it looks like a virus, but a closer look at the DNA sequence reveals that it doesn't match anything ever seen before, and so scientists can't confirm what it is or what it does. And a lot of it is thought to be yet unidentified viral information.
Hundreds of thousands of unknown viruses probably are covering our bodies, in our intestine, on our skin, in our mouth, and everywhere else.
In fact, viruses are the most abundant biological entity on Earth, more than all other organisms combined. But most of them are harmless. Some, called bacteriophages or phages for short, infect bacteria that live in us and can actually be good for your health.
In the same way that fluctuating bacterial populations are important for our health and well-being, the viruses that infect those bacteria are of importance as well. And so viruses are undoubtedly essential for life as we know it on the planet and probably for the persistence of human populations.
But there are challenges with identifying and even categorizing some of them as viruses. They're so genetically diverse that two similar-looking viruses from the same family might actually have almost nothing in common.
There's an interesting term called polyphyletic, which means, for example, children might want to put whales and, say, fish into the same category. But from the perspective of evolution, it's very clear that, say, fish and whales represent distinct forms of life that have come to look similar to each other through various sorts of forces. It may very well be that some of these different viral forms of life are not related to each other, in which case even using the word virus to link them all together might in some ways be misclassification.
But identifying and classifying this stuff could help us understand the cause of certain cancers, infections, and even prevent a pandemic.
We have learned, for example, that a range of cancers are caused by previously unknown transmissible agents, whether it be cervical cancer, the vast majority of which is caused by human papillomavirus, HPV. It's also the case for certain gastric cancers, stomach cancers, as we start to uncover the diversity of living things that have the potential to infect us, or perhaps even more likely, the sort of bacteria that are so profoundly important in our microbiome. We have the capacity of identifying agents that perhaps cause chronic diseases.
And that's exactly what researchers at the National Cancer Institute have done. They were able to catalog thousands of new viruses in hopes of aiding human health. At first, the team sampled humans and animals in hopes of understanding two specific families of viruses that are associated with cancer. But as they isolated these viruses, they uncovered many more DNA sequences that hadn't been recorded before. Viral dark matter.
And it's kind of where all labs are at this point, is we go fishing for the things that we like, and then we get this giant pile of other things, and it's not possible for one person to hand curate 5,000 entities.
Instead of just ignoring these new DNA sequences, they developed software that makes sharing new viral DNA information easier. Called CNotaker, which is freely available online for others to use, it can automatically annotate virus DNA in a way that's compliant with public databases, making understanding data and sharing findings easier than ever.
Now that our tool's available, they can easily take their virus genomes, curate them and annotate them, and share them easily with all the other researchers. And so then, God forbid there is another outbreak or pandemic, it's going to be easy for researchers who find that sequence in humans to know exactly where it was previously and which animals.
We're hoping that basically by rendering the dark matter visible, it just makes it so that if there's a disease association, somebody's going to see it rather than just ignoring it.
Although these additional viruses are a small fraction of the millions of unknown viruses that are thought to exist, adding to databases that virologists share is a small step towards preventing and treating health issues.
I think it's quite exciting that there is so much that it's unknown. Understanding these things has a deep capacity to help us understand our origins, the nature of what life is, the diversity of forms that life can exist in, and to help place us in the broader context of what it means to be alive and what our place in the living world really means.
All right, that's our show for this week. But remember, you can get all of your news on the coronavirus from Quick Take 24/7 on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube.
And for a daily recap of the day's top stories, subscribe to our newsletter. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.